Okay, so welcome back to our Composition 2 lecture. What we want to do is go into more detail about composition. We exposed you to composition, some of the rules, and I want to delve into those a little bit more deeply. So let's start off. So if you remember, we've got rule of thirds. Here we've got this young lady sitting next to a river, and you can see her body is both rule of third vertically and horizontally. We also have, and again I'll tell you about this a little bit, we also have shallow depth of field, which is another rule of composition. So here is from a movie, it's a movie Rear Window, and you can see how both characters are in the rule of third. Here is a young lady at the beach. You can see that our composition line is roughly at the rule of third, and she's at the rule of third. So you can see that, that makes a very pleasing image. Okay, here is a rule of third where we've got Yoda, who is in the vertical rule of third to the right. This has also got shallow depth of field to it because the trees behind him are out of focus. So we've got two composition rules there. Another rule of composition is weight and balance. Look how there are more people to the right, fewer people to the left, but you've got a lighter the light is hitting the walls and whatnot, and the other side is darker, which gives that image balance. So here is weight and balance. We have got the tree a little bit to the right, the sunset a little bit to the left, and that balances out the picture. It also is balanced, top and bottom. So here is our horizon line. That is a rule of composition. This also has, if you remember, our leading lines, both the power lines and the road are leading lines leading us to the middle of the, drawing our eye to the middle of the image. Here's another one with horizon line, where you've got the horizon with the sunset and all. This one also, we talked about it before, this one has a horizon line as well. So it's got weight and balance and horizon line. Like I said, you're going to have multiple composition rules to many images. Now another thing we have, this is our leading lines, and then there's something else we'll talk about here in a moment, is frame within a frame. But you can see the leading lines are all leading us to the person in the middle. Here's another one, we saw this one earlier. Here's the leading lines of the railroad track as well as the boxcars, who are all leading us to the middle of the frame. We talked about this horizon line earlier, but I did mention the leading lines of this, that both the telephone lines and the stripes on the road are leading lines leading us to the middle of that frame. And then we've got another element of composition, and it's called symmetrical. And if we cut this image down the middle, it's the same on both sides, or very close to the same on both sides. A symmetrical image is a rule of composition, and it can be very pleasing. Here's symmetrical with the thing. It's not exactly, but it's very close. So there's a symmetrical line. This also has a horizon line to it. It also has leading lines that are drawing us to the middle. So there's three elements of composition to this shot. We talked about this. This is our third one. This is very symmetrical looking. If we cut this down, we've got power lines on both sides. We've got the road. It is not exactly symmetrical, but it's close enough to where we would call that a symmetrical image. So here's asymmetrical. If we cut this, you've got the heavy bird feeder on the left, and then the not so heavy wind chimes or bells on the right. So this would be asymmetrical. This one we've looked at before. This would be asymmetrical. Even though there are boxcars on both sides, you can see the boxcars on the left go from out of frame all the way down, and the ones on the right start in frame and go in. So this is leading lines and asymmetrical. Here's an asymmetrical shot where we're looking right down these barrier to keep the cars out, but you got the sidewalk on one and a pathway or rocks and dirt on the other side. So that would be asymmetrical. Even though it's got a dividing line to it, they're different aspects on both sides of the image. Then I touched on this earlier, frame within a frame. This is a very cool thing to use in photography. Is you've got the frame within a frame, the frame of the doorway that the man's looking out here. Here's another one. We've got the rocks showing the other rock formation, and that is a frame within a frame. Here is a frame within a frame in that it's not a square frame, but you've got the staircases framing the father and son walking underneath it. So let's talk about depth of field. Depth of field is a very interesting concept in that it is what is in focus in your shot. Your depth of field is the area in front and behind the plane of focus that appears exceptionally sharp. Deep depth of field in this one, you can see the leaves behind the young lady are in focus and her face is in focus. And then shallow depth of field, you can see that the image, her face is in focus, but then the leaves and things behind her are out of focus. So we've made a shallow depth of field where, she stands out much more in the bottom image. Your depth of field determiners are the distance at which the lens is focused, the focal length of the lens, and the lens f-stop or aperture. So you can see in the top, we have got we're at we're wide open, which is a shallower depth of field. So we've got whatever's behind and whatever's in front of our bird is out of focus, and the bird is in focus. Our next image is at 5.6, which is shut down a little bit, which it increases our depth of field. So you can see the bird in front and behind our bird that we're focused on. They are in focus as well as the birds in front and the tree behind. Then if we go to f22, we're shut down very small, and that gives us a greater depth of field. And so you can see everything in that image is in focus. So for our shallow depth of field, you can see this image, it's incredibly shallow in that just the bug's head is in focus. Its tail and the twig that it's on out front are all out of focus. So this is a very shallow depth of field. It makes a very interesting image where our focus goes to the head of that bug. Here is a shallow depth of field shot to where we have got a short, I don't know if this is a scout, I don't know what this is, but they're in uniform. So we have somebody who is shorter than everyone else peeking around, and so that shallow depth of field really draws our attention to that particular child where the other folks are out of focus. So our attention is really drawn to that, to the shorter child there. Here's a shallow depth of field, a portrait where you see that child is really, brings it forward with the background out of focus. So we really look at the child and not the background. Now here's a deep depth of field shot. Deep depth of field is just as effective as shallow depth of field. We want to see all the colors. We want to see everything on this canal and the houses and the buildings on either side. And we want to see the boats. So having a deep depth of field really lets us see what's going on there because the entire image is what we are focused on, not any one thing in it. Here's another deep depth of field. A skyline at night, seeing all the buildings all the way down make it much more interesting to see the whole city as opposed to a shallow depth of field where we would only see part of it. Here's another deep depth of field where we can see that the boards on this bridge right there at the bottom of the image are in focus all the way down to the upright part of the bridge. Everything is in focus. What else does this have? It certainly has leading lines to it, and it has a horizon line to it. So there's three aspects, three things three composition rules that are being used in this image. So there is composition rules for you. You need to understand these and learn these. And as you watch images, as you watch movies, as you look at magazine ads, you look at pictures on the internet, look at and see, hey, what rule of composition are they using? Look for rule of thirds, look for shallow depth of field, look for horizon line, look for leading lines. These work in photography, in motion photography, and in graphic design. So keep in mind these things when you are creating your images. We're going to have an exam, a composition exam, and please keep in mind there's more than one composition rule to every image. And I will give you a hint. Every one of them either has shallow or deep depth of field, so that's a good place to start. But then think of horizon line, think of rule of third, think of leading lines, think of symmetry or asymmetrical. Keep in mind all of your composition rules as you go through the exam. Good luck with it.